I mean, so far, I have to say, I don't think I've seen any AI that I like, but it's evolving at such a speed that who knows what can happen in the near future, even. It's changing so quickly. But it looks awful, I think, so far. But I hear there's some great photographers who are in fashion who are using it. So I guess if you know how to do it, maybe the results can be better.
Okay, so welcome back everybody to a new episode of Eyeshot 50mm. And today we're sitting down with Alison McCauley. Alison McCauley is a photographer whose approach to the people and the places she photographs is instinctive, open-ended, and deeply subjective. Her style, I feel it's recognizable for its photographic materiality and extreme use of expressive composition. Thank you, Alison, for being with us, and welcome to Eyeshot 50mm.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I love it. Thank you. Also, with Alison, we're doing a limited edition book available for pre-order until March 31st, which is beyond here. And I'm very excited to work with you and all the Eyeshot team. So again, thank you.
So I'm very excited too. Can't wait to get started.
Yes. Okay, Alison, the very first question that we always ask all our guests, and it's, I guess, the toughest one, is who is Alison McCauley according to Alison McCauley?
I think I probably identify as a photographer. One of the first things I would identify as is a photographer. I'm also a mother, a wife. I'm somebody who's traveled around a lot. So I don't particularly feel like I have a strong sense of nationality. I feel quite like I could be at home anywhere or possibly nowhere. So I feel quite like a global person, really. I've lived in 10 different countries, in fact. Yeah, so I think that's probably one of the more unusual things about me, is that I'm not particularly tied to anywhere.
Okay, because you were born in the UK, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
But you've traveled the world, as you just said. You have this nomadic background. So I want to connect to this, and I want to ask you: do you think your nomadic background and the experiences, the places you've lived, have in some way influenced the way you see the world, and consequently how you do photography?
Yes, definitely. And I think it's become the driving force behind what I search for as a photographer, which the book that we're working on and my previous work with Anywhere But Here has been a search, a visual search, or a search that's been translated visually through photography of where I belong and looking for the sense of belonging. So I think it's for quite a long time, many years, especially before I was a photographer, this idea of figuring out who I was and where I should be troubled me. And I actually felt like something was missing. But as time went on and as I got older, I realized that this is the impetus that drives my work. So, it's a blessing, really. It's a positive thing. And if that ever went away, then I think I would have to reinvent myself so completely that I think I'd probably be lost for a few years. That it's still there. It's been there for so many years that I think it always will be. So yes, does that answer your question?
Absolutely, absolutely. You also have a solid background in painting, and then you
Yes.
switched to photography. And I wanted to ask you, which elements are you bringing from painting into your photography? What approaches as well?
Yes, that's a very good question. When I first started out in photography, I started out in just pure traditional street photography. And the main reason I did that was because it just is so accessible. It's the most natural to me and easiest, not easy because it's not, I know it's not easy, but easiest to start, easiest to get into type of photography. So for many years, I was a street photographer. I identified as a street photographer. But after a while, the work became, I would say, more and more painterly. And I felt like I liked the emotional impact of a photograph that had some painterly qualities to it. And more, I realized that I needed to drop pure traditional street photography and favor more of this sort of subjective, probably more. Yeah, I think painterly is really the best word. It's more soft focus, playing with textures, playing with reflections. So I think I stepped away from that kind of more documentary approach. And I feel like, although I'm a photographer, I'm completely a photographer, I don't even like painting anymore. I feel like I have the joy that I had of making a painting. I have that now through photography, plus so much more. I prefer the process of photography to painting.
Interesting. And do you remember the very first photo you took? Was it a disaster or like a masterpiece according to you? What feelings do you remember from that first day?
I took pictures as a child, and when you're a child, I think you're quite sensible, really strangely, children. So I would look at pictures that I took of my cats and my dog and my trees and things like that, and I would actually back then think, oh, that one's terrible, I want to throw it away. That one's terrible, and I was quite sort of judgmental of them. But as I moved more towards wanting to be a photographer, I went through this phase of thinking that I think maybe a lot of us do this, of thinking that I was better than I was, and thinking, oh, this is really great, and oh, this picture's so precious, or I'd miss an opportunity and I'd beat myself up because I'd think, oh my God, that was going to be the best picture ever. And then as time went by, I just became more and more strict with myself, and I realized that so much of what I'd done in the past was complete rubbish, really. A lot of it was not good. And then, to answer your question, I can't really remember the first picture I took. It was probably of a cat or something, but I can't remember it. But I do remember the first picture I took, where as a sort of mature and more prepared photographer, the first picture that I took that I thought, wow, I'm getting somewhere here. This is really quite good. And I can remember that afternoon. I remember that there were actually two pictures that I took.
Yeah. What was it?
Well, I lived in Geneva at the time. It was the middle of winter, and I had this crazy idea to go out and take some photographs in the street, and nothing was working. There was not enough people about. Geneva's quite quiet. In the winter, it's particularly quiet. Everybody's up skiing or working. And I gave up. I was so cold. I went into a coffee shop, and I was just relaxing, with a coffee and a little compact camera with the flash, the built-in flash. And I was just playing around with reflections and, trying to capture something beyond the window, plus the reflections, plus a play of the flash itself. And, there was no pressure. I wasn't thinking anything. I was just fooling around, really, just passing time by myself with a cup of coffee. And then later, when I got back, and I never look at my pictures that quickly, so probably a few days later, I looked at them and I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And there were two pictures. One of them made it into a book that I made a few years ago. And the other one I still love to this day. I mean, both of them, I stand by them. They're still as good as maybe the best pictures I've taken in this past year. So they were, for me, my first work as a better photographer, as a photographer who really knew what she was doing and who was able to translate her desires of what she wanted to express in a photograph. So it was a breakthrough, but it was amazing because it happened totally by accident. And if that hadn't happened, I don't know how long it would have taken to get to that point. So yeah, kind of interesting.
I like this thought that you just shared, because my next question actually connects, because you've often said that you have been drawn to street photography at the beginning, or photography in general, for its lack of control, for the fact that someone could lose control in that sense. What does it mean to you today to work within the chaos of the streets?
I really think that there is nothing that the human mind can imagine that can be as amazing as the just natural chaos and excitement that happens anywhere there is life, really, whether it's the animal or human or whatever. And I think I have in the past tried the type of photography where you set things up, like a studio portraits and things like that. But I felt like the predictability of it all. I worked on the red carpet during the film festival, and it's all so controlled. And I personally find it very tedious because you know what you're going to get. As long as you set your camera up properly, your flash is working, you know what you're going to get. And it's just, I find it a bit dull. I prefer to miss 100 pictures and to get one where something really bizarre or really beautiful that I could never have predicted happens. I think it's just more exciting.
Okay. And what makes you exactly raise the camera? What do you look for if there's something you look for when you're in the streets? What elements attracts you? What subjects? What environments? How does it work for you?
I think it has evolved as time has gone on. And now I think I look for two things. One, just beauty or something that I find beautiful. And it can be anything. It could be a leaf on the ground. It can be, a reflection in water. It can be a woman or a guy walking by. It can be anything. And the other is I am drawn to oddness, but not in a sort of funny, oh, this is really strange way, but more in a just, oh, that looks a bit like something I wouldn't expect. So yeah, I like it when I like to see something that I think I haven't seen before, not in its exact nature. Yes, I think that's exciting when you can see something new, even if it's subtle. It's a slight change from what you normally see, and
Y-
that's again, it goes back to what you brought up before about the unpredictability of it all.
Exactly, exactly. Also because like this I feel connects very well with your aesthetics as well because your images are often dark, blurred, imperfect, if I may say that, charged with, let's say, ambiguity. Is it an aesthetic and conscious choice that you make, or is a choice that or how much space do you leave for errors and imperfection and mistakes? Does it come naturally, or is something planned?
Um, no, it's not really planned. I can have an idea and I can set off with an idea, but the more unpredictability that's thrown at me, the more I thrive. And I think that is partly why I'm one of those photographers who excels when I'm photographing something I don't really know what I understand, or I don't exactly know what I'm looking at. And that's why I think I always feel most alive as a photographer when I'm in a new place. I'm a good outsider photographer, if you know what I mean. And
Yeah,
some people excel at photographing the
absolutely.
familiar, their hometown, and again, and they can make amazing work doing that. And I can do that. But I think my best work is often when I'm in a country I don't really know very well, and I'm looking at people doing things that I don't really understand. And then what my picture will be is just my curiosity, my kind of wondering what the hell is happening here? What is that? I mean, it can be very subtle. It won't be an obvious question, but it will be open. I don't have the answers, and I don't want the answers. And I think that's what's kind of exciting. It's just about looking and thinking and feeling and
In fact, your style is often described surreal, if I can use that word as well. Do you identify with this definition? Or if so, in what ways, or completely not? Like, what kind of definition would
yes.
you give to your own photography?
I think some of it is surreal, definitely. Not everything, but yes, I think especially once you start working with reflections, and occasionally I've done double exposures as well. I think everything becomes a bit unreal, and that can look quite surreal. And then because I do chase this sort of oddness that I enjoy, that would probably bring a surreal feeling to my photographs. But sometimes I think my pictures are very simple, really plain, very, basic in some ways, but quite quiet. And I think this is something I feel is changing now in me. I think my work is becoming quieter. I'm not running after some big moment or something major that's happening. It's more and more subtle and more quiet. And strangely, I found this happening. It started during COVID, when everywhere was so quiet. And, you'd go out. At that time, I lived in Geneva, and we were allowed out, but everything was closed in 2020. So there was no one out, nothing happening, almost nothing happening. But I continued to photograph out and about, and I started looking more at trees and nature. And I realized that, this is now something I really love. I really enjoy it. And, I'm still interested in human beings, of course, in photographing them, but also more and more, I have pictures that are extremely quiet and devoid of humans, or with just a subtle trace of where a human may have been by, or things like that.
Yeah. You have a great use of black and white, and you've talked in different interviews, what we also talked about it a little bit, that black and white offers you a form of distance from reality. What does black and white give you compared to color instead?
Yes. Well, first of all, I love color. I have to say, I love color. I really do. And I love many photographers who make the most beautiful color pictures. And I enjoyed it myself for quite a few years. But because I'm not interested in a true representation of reality, I like the fact that black and white just is another step further away from what reality, what real life looks like. For me, it makes it's slightly less distracting too, I think. And then because I am quite sensitive to color, I found that when I was a color photographer, I would often be looking for these little games of, can I match that with that? Or, oh, look, there's a woman wearing red walking past a red, fire hydrant or whatever. And I thought, I don't want to do that. That's not, that's not what I really want to do. But I couldn't really help myself. So I feel freer when, with it's black and white, I've got less things to be concerned about. And it's more about the emotion of the scene or the contrast or the light. I think there's so many components in photography, and sometimes when you're out and about not preparing what you're photographing, it's so quick. So for me, I think it's a little bit easier, but also it gets me to where I want to go as well.
Yeah. It's a representation of yourself as well. Like you just said, the black and white allows you to take this step further away from reality. Do you want to have the same impact on your audience? What do you think your audience gets from the photograph? What's your, let's say, mission with this type of photography and the way you do photography?
Yes, I think I probably have quite a niche following. I mean, already photography is actually quite a niche art form, really. I mean, if you think about selling paintings versus selling photography, it's usually easier to sell paintings.
Absolutely.
I think the general public doesn't quite get a lot of photography, and I think my audience is probably not enormous. It's not, it's quite small, but I think I do have quite a few loyal followers who really, my work resonates with them. They get something emotionally from it, and that makes me very happy. When I've had feedback like that, and it really makes me very happy. The other thing is, I think that I've always been a book person. I've always loved photographs in books. I think for me, it's the way I enjoy consuming, if you can use that word, photographs the best. It's a very intimate way of looking at photographs, and it's what I wanted to do. When first of all, I always started in series, and even my early work, always in series. I never thought, oh, that picture's great, I'll stop there. Once something was good, I wanted to add more. So I started with series, and then the next obvious step was a book or books. And I think that my work does work well together like that to express something. And people have come back to me and said, like, when I first did the book Anywhere But Here, many people came back to me and said, I feel the same. It's very hard to put your finger on this feeling of not belonging and of wondering where you should be. And it's interesting because you can come from many different backgrounds. Like, you could be an expatriate, on a cushy package. You can feel that way. Or you could be an asylum seeker or a refugee. There's so many people. We're such a global world now, and people do move a lot. So it's nice when something resonates with people. And I think it can be kind of soothing when you find an artwork or a book or something that reflects your own feelings. So, I mean, I think if I'd been doing this work and nobody had got it or it hadn't resonated with anyone, I think I probably would have found something else. But even though I needed to do it and I did it for myself, it's always really lovely. And that's, the nicest thing that I think a photographer can have is when it resonates with other people. It doesn't need to be, millions of people. It can be just, a few hundred.
And that's sufficient. Absolutely. Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
You've spoken about photographing anywhere and everywhere and only finding meaning later during the editing session, let's say like that. And I want to dive deep into this concept because it's very interesting. And I wanted to ask you, how do you build a sequence? Because you also just said that you worked always in series, never had one picture and that was it. How do you build the sequence, and when do you realize that a photographs belongs to a longer project?
I think quite often it would be when I'm looking through it and editing at the editing stage, at the selection stage, and I see that there's something strong there or something that could be strong. And I start putting pictures together, and then I think, okay, I need to build on that. What can I do to go and build on that? Where can I go? What pictures do I need? And then I do go after certain things. It doesn't always work, but I try and build on what I think is missing to make it a more rounded picture of what I'm trying to get through. So it is a bit of both. Sometimes I have an idea and I go out and I look for things. That doesn't normally work very well for me. It's better for me just to take the pictures and then later to select them. I find that's a freer way of doing things. And I sometimes think if you've got too much of an idea of what you want, I become a bit blinkered and I miss other opportunities. So I think that it's good to just take a lot of pictures and then select what you need. And then there could be perfectly good pictures that never make it anywhere. And also, I have many times started projects or series that haven't gone anywhere, that I've collected them, put them together, I've written text for them, come up with titles. And then I realized, no, this is not right. It's not really worthwhile, or it's too similar to something else. And I have probably about 15 projects like that I've done over the past few years where they've been abandoned. But it's not a failure. I don't feel like that's a failure. It's just part of the process. And you can spend a lot of time doing it, but it doesn't matter. It all feeds something else. So I think it's all worthwhile.
I love it. I was about to say that exactly. It's definitely not a failure. You always get a lessons out of it, whatever it is. And you work entirely by yourself. Like you do your editing, you do your sequence. Sometimes photographers have that maybe emotional attachment to their own photographs that they don't really see the full integrity of a project or where it could belong as a body of work. My next question would be, in terms of post-production and editing, what is your approach to post-production? How much the post-production do you do? Do you try to keep your photo as raw as possible in that sense? What is it?
I convert to black and white, was the first thing I do. I used to use analog, but at the moment I'm entirely digital, apart from a couple of Polaroid cameras. So most of what I've done the last few years has been digital. So I'm not fussy about which camera I use. I like little cameras that I can carry around with me. So I take the picture in color. Then I convert it in Lightroom or sometimes Photoshop to black and white. And then I might use curves a little bit, usually in Photoshop, and maybe a little bit of dodging or burning. And that's really, no, I'm not against a tiny bit of cropping. I prefer not to. But if you've got something messy on the edge and you just want to get a little bit tighter, then I don't think you should beat yourself up about that.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't think you should cut your picture in half, in terms of the total space, but a little trimming, I think I'm not radical about that at all.
Okay. So do you think that post-production should be more a correction rather than, say, a language? Like how much does it actually influence the final result? In the end, because there are people that have a very strong and visible post-production, but as an aesthetic choice as well. And what is it for you? What do you think about it?
I do find that when I first got Photoshop, which was many, many years ago, I thought, wow, this is amazing. Look at the things that you can do. And I did all this crazy stuff and it looks so awful. It was just, terrible, absolutely terrible. And ever since that, I was so horrified about it. It almost had a sort of chemical look, if you know what I mean. It sort of looked synthetic somehow.
Yeah.
And I've always been slightly horrified by that. I'm sure there are photographers that can do it wonderfully well, but I'm not one of them. I think my work is quite sort of subtle and soft focus, and I think to take it too far would look really weird. But maybe I should probably say now that I love using filters, mechanical filters on cameras.
Yeah.
And I make my own, and I use store-bought ones as well. So a lot of the time when, if the light's low, I can get the blurred effect I want, but you can't always do that with digital cameras. They're just designed to be sharp and just, using manual focus and getting it wrong doesn't work. It just looks weird. So it actually needs to be in focus, but soft focus. So the best way for me to do that was to start playing around with my own filters.
Can you tell me a little bit more about these filters? I love it that you make it yourself. Like, what kind of filters have you created? Could you share
It's
a little bit more?
not terribly complicated. Once when I was traveling somewhere, I found these old sort of plastic A4 squares in various colors, and they were used for a projection or something. I don't think they even make them anymore. So I think people would write on them and it would be reflected on a whiteboard or something. So I thought, wow, these will be great. I'll cut them up and I'll make some filters. And they were fantastic. But the only problem is that because they're plastic, they wear down and they get to a point where you can hardly see through them anymore. But
Sure.
then I sort of traveled the world looking for these pieces of plastic, never found them again. And then eventually I ordered something from Amazon, which is meant to go on lights. So to give studio lights for photographers, you have red ones and green ones and blue ones, yellow. So you put them in front of the light and it gives you the color or the effect that you want. So I cut those up and made filters from those. But again, they don't last that long. They have this, in the beginning, they're too sharp because you can see quite clearly through them. And then they go through this perfect sweet spot of being just, out of focus enough and with enough little scratchy bits and things that I like. And then they go too far and you can hardly see through them. And then I have to get another one. So, but it's fine. I just have to be, when I go on a big trip, I take loads of them because in case I wear them all down. But yeah, I mean, it slows you down as well. And sometimes I can't fit them on lenses. So I actually have to hold them in front of the lens. So it's not, you can't kind of rush around taking quick pictures. You need enough time to set up each shot. But I like being a slower photographer now anyway. So that fits with what I want.
Okay, great. And is editing more difficult than shooting for yourself? What makes you discard a photograph that is, let's say, technically good?
I think something I've learned, which is really quite interesting, is that I need to, when I've taken some pictures, I don't look at them quickly. I always let a little bit of time go by, unless there's some rush for some reason, which is rare nowadays. So I always wait, a few weeks, and then I will look at them all through. I won't delete anything. I'll look at the whole lot, and then I leave it again for a few days, and I go back again, and I put the little crosses, the flag with the cross, and get rid of all the ones that I don't want. And I get rid of them. If they have no use to me and I don't really like them, then I just get rid of them. And then I look at yet again, you have a little bit of a pause, look yet again. And then I start selecting the ones that I think I can use somewhere. And if I like them, but they don't have a place, then I'll probably, if I really like them, but they don't have a place, I'll keep them because you never know, in the future, they might find their place. But yeah, it's a slow process. And I would say that it's probably not something I'm very good at because I can be good at it, but I take so long. I'm sure there are other photographers who just go through quickly and know exactly which one they want and which one they don't want. But it's a very gradual process for me.
Sure. Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. Like every photographer has its own or his own way of doing it. So thank you for sharing that. I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about collectives, being part of photographic collective. We know that you're part of Up Photographers.
Mm-hmm.
Which is very interesting as well. And the very first thing that came to mind when I discovered this is that up photographer is often associated with a traditional way of doing street photography, if I can say that. How do you fit in it? How does your style fit in it? Which is very interesting because it's not like a label. It doesn't need to be fixated term that everybody needs to follow under. How do you fit in this?
Yes. Well, I would, in the past, I never applied or never asked around if anyone thought that they would be interested in me because I assumed that they wouldn't. And then a few years ago, they went through, a few changes. A few people left and a few different people came in. And they broadened their scope of what they thought street photography was and is. I agree with them. And they brought in other photographers who work in a more poetic style or a different style. And I was asked if I would like to join, and I had to go through the vetting process. And I was delighted, first of all, that they had kind of broadened their scope. And I think it's really an admirable thing for a very established collective to do, to question themselves and to look what could be changed. And I think it's really, really great that they did that. And I was delighted to join them. And I think it's a great group, a really fantastic group of people.
And what personal and professional value do you find in being part of a photographic collective like Up?
I think they're always there. Any member is there if I have a question or if I wanted somebody's opinion. They are the first people that I would go to, and we occasionally share emails or communicate by other means. And I can just think, oh, I think he's done that or she's done that. And I can send off an email to 6 or so of them and say, what do you think about this? And they're fantastic. They always get back to you, and I will do that for any member as well. So there's that as well. There's also, it's just a nice feeling, I think. I like to be part of something wider, and we do exhibitions together and, participated in street photography festivals together, exhibited together. It's a nice thing. It's a good feeling. And
Yeah.
I think photography can be quite a solitary pursuit at times, and it's nice to belong to something wider than just yourself.
Exactly, because the other question I wanted to ask you is, in what ways do you think photography collectives contribute to the general broader photographic community? Like, what's their role, let's say, as a collective?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I don't really know if I have the answer because I mean, in a way, they are, for example, a street photography collective. In a way, they are saying this is street photography or this could be street photography, and it helps to clarify maybe that point if anyone cares about that. But I don't know exactly how they contribute to the wider picture. But
Sure.
it is true that as a group, you have more impact and more force than as an individual. So there
Yeah.
must be many benefits for that. But
Okay.
for me personally, I think my main desire with joining the group was to feel part of something and to have people that I can turn to and to help people within the group if they needed my help as well. I mean,
Okay.
automatically you trust them all, you know them a bit. I haven't met them, by a long way, I haven't met all of them, but
Sure.
I know that they're the kind of people I could ask. Oops, my cat's coming.
Oh, funny. Love it. Hello.
Bye-bye.
I have 2 cats myself, so I love it. So cute. Spontaneous. Getting back to our talk, my other question, which doesn't truly connect to collectives in that sense, but more on the role of women as photographers, which is something that I deeply value as well. And I'm sure you as well. We've talked to a lot of different women photographers. And for a woman, it's always harder to be in this field and to be recognized as well, because we always start from 2 steps down compared to men, unfortunately. And what's
Yes.
your opinion on that? Because sometimes it's a problem of access, is a problem of going out, not have the same safety net that men have. How do you live with this as well? What is your experience?
Yeah, I think personally, I haven't had a bad experience as a woman. And in fact, I think it's given me access in quite a few instances. When I worked for a while as a documentary photographer, and I was given access to families, to mothers with children, situations like that, which I think would actually have been harder had I been a man. But having said that, that's my personal experience, and I'm very aware of many of the things that you mentioned before, and I know it's true. And I hope it's changing. I see some change, but there's still many things that a woman she has to put herself, as you were saying, at risk. And I think it is a lot harder. I think access is a lot harder, especially in certain countries. I mean, women maybe, working in certain countries, it's very hard. They can't just walk around with a camera. A man could. But I do think it's getting better in many ways here. And I see, unfortunately, when I think of some of my favorite photographers, they're almost all men. And that's not because women photographers are not good. It's just because they've been so established for so long and the women was such a small minority. And I really, really hope that that's changing. And I see it slowly changing, but I think it's taking too much time.
Yeah, it's taking too much time, and I feel like it's taking such as a small group of people in the world that actually care about this. Like I've been talking also about this to other male photographers instead, and I feel like community and the responsibility they have as well as male photographers in helping spreading the world, or maybe not spreading the word, but changing the mentality needs to be part of the entire process. And it's not always like this, but this is just a small thought I had. But very interesting. Thank you for answering that. I want to move forward to something a little bit more different. And I want to talk about the ethics in photography, in street photography, in being out there, let's say like that. Where do you think the boundaries between observation and invasion in photography lie? How do we draw the line? Also, it's a very complex discussion.
I know, yeah. I always think that if I was the person being photographed, would I be comfortable? If my answer is no, then I don't want to take that picture. I'm quite a private person, really. If I would be bothered by somebody, putting a camera in my face in the street and taking the picture, then I won't do that. And I don't really do that. It's not really my nature either. But, then you see photographs by other photographers who do that, and they're great photographs. They really have their value. So it's a very tricky line to draw, isn't it? And sometimes I think photographers do go too far. I know, and they possibly shouldn't have, but sometimes in the end the result is worthwhile. Personally, I wouldn't do it ever.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, I can think of some fabulous bodies of work that wouldn't exist if somebody, and it's usually a man, I have to say, hadn't gone and taken those pictures.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I feel like it really depends on the place you're living in.
Exactly.
For instance, in Europe, we have very strict laws about privacy. In the US, I know there is a little bit more lenient in that sense. In countries like Asia, maybe it's a completely different story again. So I don't know if it's ever ethically defensible or if it is or it was a privilege of the past in some ways. I don't know, maybe it was much easier once, like I've been talking to photographers exactly from the US, and they were telling me once it was just so easy to enter, I don't know, a parade or an event and just shooting photographs of people and not have anything in return. Like now maybe people are more sensible, which is totally fine, of course. But I don't know if the artistic practice kind of like feels this weight as well. I don't know, in photographers. So this was more my questions.
Yeah, I think there are even certain situations and places where people love to have their picture taken, and then the danger is that they start posing too much or hamming it up for their camera, and you might not want that. But yeah, I think you have to have a certain sensitivity to what's going on around you and how people feel. And in some countries, it's absolutely not acceptable. And I think the bigger the city, normally, if you're really into sort of more traditional street photography, I think the easier it is. I think Paris, for example, is much easier than some smaller town in France, and the same London, easier than Bath or another smaller town in England.
Is there anything today in today's photography trends, let's say, in the photography scene that you feel maybe exaggerated or hypercritical that you've seen that has made you think this or overreacted, I guess?
To the question of sort of an invasion of privacy?
No,
or?
in more in general, like, do you think photography in today's photography scene, is there something that you find that you can't stand? Like there are trends, I can see your face, so I guess there's something.
I mean, so far, I have to say, I don't think I've seen any AI that I like, but it's evolving at such a speed that who knows what can happen in the near future, even. It's changing so quickly. But it looks awful, I think, so far. But I hear there's some great photographers who are in fashion who are using it. So I guess if you know how to do it, maybe the results can be better. I mean, apparently even, like certain fashion brands are using it, using AI models, and we hardly know. I don't think we even can tell. So yeah, it's getting pretty good. But the idea of an artist photographer using it, so far, I'm not really thrilled by the idea. But I don't think it's good to say I'm absolutely don't like it at all, but so far I don't love what I've seen.
I don't love, yes, absolutely.
Just trying to be diplomatic, but yeah.
Following up on this, I want to talk, still being on the contemporary side of photography in that sense. In the internet age, we have this very aesthetic perfection at all costs. How much honesty in spontaneous photography we're risking of losing with this attitude?
Definitely
for
a
a
lot. Yeah.
conventional beauty, right? Like
Hmm.
how do you see this impact of the internet and like this perfection that we always need to see, otherwise it's not working?
I think that there will always be a place, and perhaps even more of a place in the future, when things become even slicker and more perfect and everything is made by AI and looks so perfect. That I think there's a real value in something that looks handcrafted or something that looks very humanly imperfect. And I think, yeah, I think we might move even more towards that and give greater value to very human looking imperfect pictures and handmade books and things like that. I
Yeah.
think that there are things that machines and AI can't create. And I think I have no real idea, but I suspect that we will go against that and look for something more real.
I feel like there is this definitely this switch also in the young generation of like kind of going back to something that was older. I know I see a lot of like, for instance, vintage clothing or like going back to analog. I feel like we're getting so sick of what is reality now that we really want to try to go back to what it was. I don't know.
Yes.
This is just a personal experience. I've noticed between new generations this kind of approach, which it's interesting to see.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, go back to how it was before, but also I think maybe there's a little bit of wanting to escape our
Yes,
reality now, which is not,
exactly.
it's pretty problematic. And maybe, looking at news reports every night before you go to sleep is not that good for the soul. So maybe it's
Exactly.
better to look at, a beautiful photo book or something more. Yeah, I mean, we
Yes,
need to follow the news, of course, but
of course.
sometimes we just need to get away from it all and to put our
Absolutely.
blinkers on. If we're privileged enough to be able to do that, not everyone
Absolutely.
is.
Absolutely agreed. I want to switch gears a little bit and going towards something a bit different. You know, I've read this quote by Ansel Adams that basically, I'm not just quoting, I'm just summarizing it, that we are basically what we live, like the songs we hear, the photographs we look at, the book we read, and everything. So everything that is around us kind of inspires us in some ways, even unconsciously. So my first question for you would be, could you tell us a little bit more about your inspiration, whether they are photographic inspiration or painters, books? Where did you or do you get your inspiration?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's you and Ansel Adams are right. It's a culmination of everything you've experienced in your life and everything you've been drawn to visually or emotionally. So I think life itself is obviously the first source of inspiration and your
Yeah,
experiences in that life. And then later on, I traveled a lot, so I'm very conscious of place. That's a very important thing to me and where I am, where I want to go to next. And I always look at my surroundings. I kind of eat them up visually when I'm somewhere new. It's really an important thing. And then, people that you meet are inspiring, either the way they look or the way they are or the way they behave. And
yeah,
then, yes, books, literature, films. I love watching films. I mean, cinematographers like Wong Kar-wai from Hong Kong. I just, visually, his films are so beautiful. I find them.
yeah,
I wouldn't try and copy it, but it's just inspiring. It's just so beautiful.
absolutely.
Um, and the work that goes into his films is just amazing. And then other photographers. I mean, I have quite a few photographers that I followed for a long time. I mean, the earliest photographer I really, really loved was Robert Frank, and I still absolutely adore his photographs. His book, The Americans, I think is just, obviously everybody loves it, right? But
That's the
I've never put it down. There's hardly a month goes by that I don't look at it. It's just amazing what he accomplished and what he was able to say through those photographs. I think is just beyond inspiring. And there's other photographers like I love Michael Ackerman, Jeff Jacobson, Trent Park. I think is pretty genius as well.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Martin Bogren. I think is a very inspiring photographer too.
Okay, Alison. Now I want to go deeper and talk a little bit more about the limited edition book we're doing together. So Beyond here suggests for sure a sense of elsewhere, like we've been talking about it as well. Could you take us a little bit inside the journey, the idea of the title, the journey, the photographic journey, and explain the audience a little bit what is it about?
Okay, so I had a book that came out called Anywhere But Here. And then I think sometimes when you have a book, you sort of draw a line under that project. But because the work from that project was really so important to me, it's this whole idea of constantly searching, for where I belong and where I want to be. Though I felt there's no way could not continue. But things evolve a little bit. And I came to realize that I really, as we mentioned before, we spoke about it before, that I really found that it was important that I had this drive to keep going, to keep searching. And that was what was feeding my desire to take these pictures and to put them together. So I came up with this title, Beyond Here, which is an obvious continuation, but also a little bit different. So it's this perpetual search of looking at everything and of kind of expressing visually, and I hope sort of emotionally as well, the search for home and for belonging and just enjoying. Now I think it's more, there's a lot of enjoyment too in this search and a lot of awareness that it's a very, very positive thing. And it's not, I can be anywhere and feel at home to some extent. And I think that's, it's nice to be at that point. Whereas many years ago, I thought, I'm not at home anywhere and this is a disaster. And to move on from that to think, I can go to Djibouti and feel at home. I can go to, Korea and feel at home. It's a wonderful thing. It's a very positive thing.
It truly speaks more about a state of mind, I feel, than a place, or as you were saying, a specific places. Do you feel then that Beyond Here speaks more about you or about a condition that many people might also have? And following up, what do you hope the audience will receive from Beyond Here?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's really, I'm telling the story from my point of view. And I think at this stage, I'm aware that there are many other people that will feel something similar. So I know that already. I know there are people who feel like that. And I would love to grow on that audience and find more people who also feel like that and to relate to the work. Yeah, and I think that's, that would be a very positive accomplishment if more people came to me and said, yes, I feel that too. And I really relate to this book.
Okay, great. Alison, we're done with the first part. I thank you so much. I hope I made you feel comfortable as much as I was comfortable with you. And I hope
You're very good at your job.
Thank you so much. And I hope you also had a little bit more fun. We'll have more fun later, but I hope this was a good experience for you.
Thank you for your time. It's my pleasure.
Great. So we see everybody in part 2, and thank you again, Alison.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, so welcome back, everybody, to the second part of this interview, which is the unfiltered part. And we're back with Alison. Thank you, Alison, again for being here. And I'm very excited to play, actually. So we'll start immediately with the rapid fire question game. So what I will ask you a couple of things, whatever comes to your mind without overthinking, just shoot it.
Okay.
So the first one would be 3 words to describe yourself.
Mentally chaotic, but in my mind, not in my surroundings. Restless and probably gentle, maybe.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. You're very sweet. If photography wasn't your passion, what other things would you do? What would you be?
I possibly a printmaker. Yeah, I think I could have moved on into printmaking from painting.
Interesting.
So maybe that.
Okay. When you look at your early photographs today, what do you feel? Nostalgia, embarrassment, or pride?
Bit of both. I mean, if I look at the very early stuff, embarrassment. There was a time when I was working as a documentary photographer, and I thought, yeah, I really achieved quite a lot, and I was quite brave to go to those places. Yeah, so a pride in that. And then I think I'm quite proud of the fact that I was able to turn my back on certain things and say, right, I'm going in this direction, and I'm going completely in this direction. So I'm pleased with that too. But then, I can still be embarrassed by some really terrible pictures or by forgetting to take my lens cap off or something.
Love it. Love it. Rank these three aspects of a photograph in order of importance: subject, light, and composition.
Tricky. Maybe subject most important, and composition, I don't know.
I know it's
Subject,
hard.
light, composition. But I think they're so close. I think they're all probably equally important.
There. Okay. What's the craziest thing someone has told you about your photographs?
No, I don't think I've had anything too crazy. Well, yeah, I can tell you a little funny story.
Yes, please.
I did an early book with some of my first sort of soft focus, with the filter on, a book of these photographs from Asia, and I combined photographs of original archival family photographs. So, and my mum was looking through this book. And she said, "This is lovely." And I thought, I didn't think she liked that kind of thing. I felt my heart was really warm and everything. And then she said, "But why did you include all these blurred black and white ones?" So basically, she was saying, "I love the family photographs, but I hate your stuff." So that was kind of funny. But I mean, I didn't take it the wrong way. She likes what she likes, and
moms are always very honest, brutally honest, but it's their job. It's also their job. What's a photography cliche you can't stand?
I don't like anything that says you can't do something. Like you mustn't. I don't know, you mustn't photograph someone from behind, or you mustn't crop a little bit, or I don't like things to be too restrictive. I think we should be reasonably open, and I think everything should be judged on an individual basis. Not judge, but you should think about it on an individual basis. I don't like restrictions. If anyone tells me you can't do something, I'm going to go and do it.
Exactly. I'm definitely going to do it. Absolutely. What's a photography book you've worn out because you've read it so much? I think maybe I know.
Yeah, well, probably the Americans, because it's been so long. I've had it for so many years.
Absolutely.
But, there are other ones as well, like Jeff Jacobson's The Last Roll, which I find is such a, do you know it? It's a really beautiful book with beautiful photographs, but it's just the emotional journey of what he was doing with his last role and his cancer diagnosis. And yeah, it's just a very special book.
It is definitely so special. If your photography was a music genre, what would it be?
Music genre, maybe blues. I don't know.
Yeah,
blues,
interesting.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Interesting. Okay. The craziest thing you've done for a photograph?
Yes, once a long time ago, just before I was, very good. I was just kind of in the early stages of being a photograph. But I saw a bird, a sort of long-legged bird, land on the head of a cow. I was on holiday in Antigua, and I thought, I've got to get a picture of that. And I ran across this field to get this picture wearing flip-flops, and I was bitten by a small snake. So I guess that was like, I don't think it was poisonous, because it felt like a bee sting, and I didn't have any bad consequences, so I don't think it was poisonous. But yeah, that was a bit silly.
Yes, to just run out of it. It's fair, totally fair.
Yeah.
You said that you love watching movies, so I wanted to ask you, what do you think are 3 movies that every photographer should watch?
I think it depends on your kind of photography and where you want to go with it. I'd say Wong Kar-wai, In the Mood for Love, for me, is probably my number one.
Yeah.
I loved The Graduate for its kind of surreal imagery. There's some really crazy image of him going into the pool, I think, or going out with his mask on and his flippers, and he's walking on the floor, and it's just really surreal. It's kind of quite kooky and fun.
Interesting.
And another one, I can't really think. Yeah. What's his name? I can't think. The American photographer who did, it'll come to me, but I can't think of his name right now.
I wanted to ask you, what was the best advice you've ever received in photography?
Probably when I heard someone say, "Kill your darlings." I think I was getting too precious about individual images and not thinking about the whole. And it was this idea that you had to be quite ruthless, and when you were selecting photographs, and get outside help if necessary, and just select what needed to be there and not keep the other ones.
Okay. And what's the worst advice you've ever received in photography?
To focus better.
I like that. Okay, worse. I never listened to the worst advice. Absolutely. Okay. What is the most important lesson you've learned in photography instead on your own experiences, based on your own experiences?
Probably personally, I've learned that if you really want something, go for it and be prepared to put the work in and be prepared for it not to happen quickly and just to keep going. I think a long time ago, I heard somebody, a friend of mine who's in politics, say that success is persevering long enough in the right direction. And that stuck in my mind. And I think that is very true. I think you need some talent as well, but I think it's important to keep going and keep going, not exactly the same direction, but keep going after what you want. And the other thing is, I think, start wide and narrow down. Don't start off with something very narrow and then it's hard to break out again. I think, as a younger photographer, I did everything. And then it was partly an elimination process. And I
like
found
this
more and more
approach.
what I liked. Yeah.
Totally.
I think it gives you a stable, anything stable has a wide base and it's more narrow on the top. You don't want it the other way around. So
sure,
I think
absolutely. True, totally true. Have you ever experienced a creative envy?
No, not really. I think there's space for everybody. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, too many photographers going after too few things. But I think everybody's different and there's space for every person and every type of photography. And also, I think you can make things happen yourself. If you're after, for example, a book deal or something, make your own. It is possible. I think, obviously everybody wants to achieve their desires, but it's not always possible through other people. So I see, for example, actors who aren't getting the roles they want, they set up their own production company if they can. And I like that. It's kind of empowering.
Absolutely
if you
agreed.
can, just make it happen for yourself.
Yeah. If you could photograph any historical era in history without time limitations, whatever, what would you photograph? What would you decide to photograph?
I think it's pretty good right now. Possibly before an era before all those chain shops took over all the city centers, anytime before that. Maybe like these could have been nice.
Interesting, yeah.
When, Zara and Finham and all that weren't on every high street and things were a bit more, different looking.
Love it. I would love to see your aesthetic in that era. I think it would be so, so interesting. Final one. What do you believe in?
Gosh, in general?
Yeah, in general.
In photography. I believe in, hopefully, being a good person. And I don't believe, unfortunately, that being a good person means everything will be okay, because that's not the case. But I believe in doing the best you can and just being a decent person and hoping that people will be decent back to you. I don't have a religion. Chose not to at a very young age. So I think in order for humans to behave well, you just have to behave. Yeah. You don't need a religion to tell you to do the right thing. So
absolutely agreed. Okay, Alison, thank you.
Very philosophical.
I love it. That's exactly the point of this question. I feel like photographers are always like, what? But then it comes out and it's interesting because answers are always so different and so special. Then I'll move to the icon clash, which some people have have actually labeled it as a torture, but I'm sure it's not going to be a torture. But let's start with that. So it's the icon clash. I will give you different photography icons names. You can choose between one or the other, and then we will stick to it until you switch preference.
Okay.
So the very first one would be Eric Cartier-Bresson or Robert Frank?
Robert Frank.
Okay. Robert Frank or Anders Pettersson?
Ooh, Robert Frank for what he accomplished so early on.
Interesting. Robert Frank or Daido Moriyama?
Maybe Daido Moriyama for his enormous volume of work, which is always so good too.
My God, agreed. Daido Moriyama or Joseph Kudelka?
Daido Moriyama.
Okay. Daido Moriyama or Trent Park?
Daido Moriyama.
Okay. Daido Moriyama or Larry Clark?
Daido Moriyama.
Daido Moriyama or Diane Arbus?
Daido Moriyama.
Okay, interesting. Last one. Daido Moriyama or William Klein?
Daido Moriyama. Yeah.
Okay, love it. Then I guess we have.
I think he's just so
good.
He photographs so much and it's so loose. And I think he's a very brave photographer, very cool.
Such a recognizable style as well. Like you can definitely see it immediately that that's him for sure.
And he never stopped.
Never.
Like he kind of said he did once, but he didn't really.
Exactly. So interesting. Alison, we're actually done this time. So thank you so much once again for being with us, with me. And it was so special to talk to you, and very excited for this limited edition book we're doing together. So thank you.
I'm so excited too. Thank you very much.